The Secret Keeper. My grandmother stole my childhood, my identity, my life. Chapter 1. The Echo in the Attic. Savannah, Georgia, 2023. The air in my home was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and old memories. At 60, I, Evelyn Hall, a retired history teacher, lived a life of quiet contentment. My daughter, Sarah, 35, and my grandson, Daniel, 10, were the twin stars of my universe. I had spent decades teaching the complexities of the past, helping students connect with the echoes of history. Yet my own past remained a haunting, impenetrable void. I remembered my life from the age of 6, my childhood with my grandmother, Meg, in a small, unassuming house right here in Savannah. She had been my rock, my sole guardian, a woman who radiated a quiet strength and unwavering love. When I asked about my life before 6, about my parents, Meg's story was always the same, delivered with a gentle sadness. Your parents? Darling, they died in a terrible car accident. It was a long time ago. I took you in, raised you. You were so young you hardly remember. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my grandmother, the woman who had given me everything. The fragments of memory from before 6 were scattered, blurry images, like old photographs bleached by time. A different house, a different voice, a fleeting sensation of warmth. But the trauma of losing my parents and the subsequent partial amnesia were, Meg explained, natural consequences of such a devastating event. I learned to live with the blank spaces, to accept the narrative she had woven for me. Recently, Meg had passed away, a quiet departure, leaving behind a profound emptiness in my heart. Sorting through her belongings, a task filled with bittersweet nostalgia, fell to Sarah and me. There were boxes of old letters, faded photographs, trinkets from a lifetime. It was Daniel, my curious 10-year-old grandson, who found it. "Grandma Evelyn," he called out from the dusty attic, his voice echoing in the rafters. "Look what I found." He clambered down the pull-down stairs, a cloud of dust following him, clutching a sturdy, leather-bound trunk. It was old, antique, smelling of cedar and forgotten secrets. Inside, nestled beneath layers of yellowed lace and moth-eaten shawls, were several thick notebooks. Their pages, yellowed with age, were filled with a meticulous, elegant script. "Grandma Meg's diaries?" I murmured, my heart giving a little flutter. Meg had always been private, never speaking of personal writings. I took the first one, my fingers tracing the faded ink. The earliest entries were mundane: recipes, garden notes, observations about the weather, the everyday chronicles of a life. I began to read, driven by a quiet curiosity, a desire to connect with the woman who had shaped me. Hours turned into days. I devoured the meticulous details of Meg's life, her daily routines, her simple joys. But as I delved deeper into the entries from 1969, the year I turned 6, the year my life supposedly began with her, a subtle chill began to creep over me. The tone shifted. The handwriting became more frantic, the sentences more fragmented, imbued with an unsettling intensity. There were mentions of protecting my little angel, of saving her from a terrible fate. Then whispers of unworthy parents, a life she doesn't deserve. My blood ran cold. This wasn't the story of a grieving grandmother taking in an orphan child. This was something darker, more sinister. The dates, the details, they didn't align with the narrative Meg had so carefully constructed. A tremor of fear ran through me. What had truly happened in 1969? Why had my beloved grandmother lied about my parents' deaths? Who was I, Really. The comfortable silence of my home suddenly felt oppressive, filled with unspoken questions. The truth, I sensed, was lurking in these brittle pages, and it was waiting to unravel not just my past, but the very foundation of my identity. My heart pounded a silent drumbeat of dread. Chapter 2: The Unveiling. The diaries became a consuming obsession. Each evening, after Sarah and Daniel were asleep, I would sit in the quiet of my living room, the yellowed pages casting long shadows in the lamplight. The elegant script, once merely a curiosity, now felt like a coded message, slowly revealing a terrifying truth. Meg's early entries from 1969 were filled with a chilling fixation on her daughter, my biological mother, though I didn't know it then. Meg wrote of her daughter's poor choices, her unsuitable husband, Thomas. She believed her daughter, then a young woman, was throwing her life away, and worse, was creating an unfit environment for me, her only grandchild. The language was laced with a disturbing blend of love and possessive control, a distorted sense of righteousness. Then, the entries grew more alarming. Meg detailed a plan. Not a plan to help, but a plan to save me. She spoke of a rescue, of taking me to a place where I would be safe, where I would be truly loved. My hands trembled as I read, a growing sense of dread gripping my stomach. The most horrifying entry was dated August 14th, 1969. My 6th birthday was in July. Meg described in chilling detail how she drove to my parents' home, how she managed to slip a sedative into their drinks to ensure they would sleep soundly, unaware. How she then crept into my bedroom, gathered me from my bed, a small, sleeping child, and carried me out into the dark night. She wrote of the long drive across state lines, from a small, unnamed town in Texas, all the way to Savannah, Georgia. My amnesia, the trauma I had always attributed to a car accident, was, in Meg's own words, the direct result of that terrifying, nocturnal abduction. She stirred a little angel, Meg had written, her hand steady, terrifyingly devoid of remorse. But I whispered, "Hush, little one, we're going somewhere safe." She whimpered, then settled. The journey was long, but necessary, to protect her, to give her the life she deserves. A new name, a new start. Evelyn, my Evelyn. My breath hitched. Evelyn, my name, my entire identity built on a lie. My parents hadn't died in a car crash. They had been alive. They had been searching for me. And Meg, my loving, devoted grandmother, was the architect of my stolen childhood. She was my kidnapper. The revelation struck me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air. The woman who had raised me, cherished me, taught me everything I knew, had committed a monstrous crime. I couldn't keep this to myself. My head swam, my world spinning on a new, horrifying axis. I had to tell Sarah. She found me in the living room, surrounded by the open diaries, my face pale, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Mom, what's wrong? What happened?" With a trembling voice, I laid out the truth. Piece by agonizing piece. Sarah listened, her own face draining of color, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "Grandma Meg? No. Mom, this can't be real." But the evidence, printed in careful script before her, was undeniable. "My name," I whispered, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "My name isn't Evelyn Hall. It's Emily. Emily Simpson." She wrote it, my real name. Sarah, though deeply shaken, quickly shifted into practical mode. "We have to find them, Mom. your real family, your parents. The realization that my parents might have lived, might have searched for me, might still be alive, was a new, searing pain, but also a fragile flicker of hope. The police were out of the question. It had been over 50 years. We needed someone with specialized skills. Sarah, ever resourceful, found him. Detective Robert Griffin, a private investigator with a reputation for solving cold cases and reuniting families. His office was unassuming, but his eyes, when I told him my story, held a quiet intensity and a profound understanding. He listened patiently, taking notes, occasionally asking a precise, pointed question. When I handed him the diaries, his expression remained unreadable, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "This is a difficult case, Mrs. Hall," he said, his voice grave. "It's been a long time, but with the details from these diaries, and if you're willing to do a DNA test..." I had already taken a DNA test years ago, out of curiosity, for genealogical research. I had no specific goal, just a general interest in my ancestry. Little did I know it would become the key to unlocking my entire existence. Detective Griffin took the results, promising to cross-reference them with national missing persons databases and adoption records. The waiting was excruciating. Every phone call, every email sent my heart into a frantic rhythm. Then the call came. From Detective Griffin. His voice was calm, but there was an undertone of excitement. "Mrs. Hall," he said, "I have a match. A strong one." In 1969, a 6-year-old girl named Emily Simpson was reported missing from Willow Creek, Texas. Her parents were Marilyn and Thomas Simpson. Thomas Simpson died in a car accident several months after her disappearance. But Marilyn Simpson, she never gave up hope. "She's still alive, Mrs. Hall. She's still alive in Willow Creek, Texas. And she's still listed as the mother of Emily Simpson, an unsolved missing persons case." The phone slipped from my grasp. My biological mother, alive. All these years. My mind reeled, the world tilting once more. The woman I knew as Meg, my loving grandmother, had stolen me. But another woman, my true mother, had never stopped looking. My stolen past was finally revealing its agonizing, glorious truth. Chapter 3. Ghosts of Willow Creek. The revelation that my biological mother, Marilyn Simpson, was alive and living in Willow Creek, Texas, struck me within force that left me breathless. Not only had my grandmother Meg stolen my childhood, but she had condemned my true mother to decades of unimaginable grief. The pain of Meg's betrayal was now compounded by the agonizing thought of Marilyn's lifelong sorrow. Detective Griffin, understanding the enormity of the news, arranged for the first contact. Not a direct call, not yet. A cautious, mediated video call. He believed it was best for both of us to have a neutral party present, to manage the emotional tidal wave that was sure to break. The screen flickered to life, and there she was, Marilyn Simpson, an elderly woman, fragile-looking, her hair silver, her face etched with the lines of age and unspoken pain. But her eyes, they held a spark, a deep, persistent flicker of hope that had clearly refused to die, even after 54 years. "Marilyn," Detective Griffin said gently, "I'd like you to meet Evelyn Hall." Our eyes met. A lifetime of yearning, of absence, of unspoken questions, condensed into a single, breathtaking moment. Tears welled in Marilyn's eyes, and then in mine. "Emily?" she whispered, her voice reedy, barely audible. "My Emily?" "Yes," I managed, my voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I think so." The conversation was hesitant at first, filled with silences, with the weight of decades. Marilyn, frail as she was, slowly began to recount her story. The night I disappeared, the frantic search, the police investigation, focusing, agonizingly, on Thomas, my father. "They thought he took you, Emily," she said, her voice breaking, "or that he did something. But I knew he wouldn't." Thomas's death, a few months later, in a car accident, had made the case go cold, leaving Marilyn with nothing but a gaping hole in her heart and the haunting mystery of her missing daughter. The cruel irony was that Meg, my kidnapper, had been seemingly inconsolable after my disappearance, even assisting in the initial searches, throwing Marilyn off any suspicion. Another layer of Meg's deception. The need to go to Willow Creek became an overwhelming imperative. I had to see her, touch her, stand in the house where my earliest memories had been formed, where my life had been stolen. Sarah, ever supportive, immediately booked our flights. Daniel, though young, sensed the profound significance of the journey. "We're going to find your real family, Grandma," he declared, his innocent excitement a stark contrast to my swirling emotions. The journey to Willow Creek, Texas, felt like a pilgrimage. As we drove into the small, sleepy town, a wave of unfamiliar familiarity washed over me. The dusty main street, the quaint brick buildings, the vast open sky. Something stirred within me, a faint echo of a forgotten past. We pulled up to a modest, charming house, painted a pale yellow, with a porch swing on the front. Marilyn was waiting, standing on the porch, a small, trembling figure. My breath caught in my throat. This time, there was no hesitation. We rushed into each other's arms, a torrent of tears and whispered apologies, half a century of unspoken love and sorrow pouring out. "My baby," Marilyn sobbed, her arms wrapped tightly around me. "My Emily, I never gave up hope." Inside the house, it was like stepping into a time capsule. Old photographs adorned the walls, a young Marilyn and Thomas, beaming, holding a baby. A tiny girl with my eyes, riding a tricycle. My heart ached with a profound sense of loss for the life that had been stolen. Marilyn led me to a small room. "This was your room, Emily." A faded wallpaper, a small wooden rocking horse in the corner. As I looked around, fragmented memories, like shards of broken glass, began to surface. The rocking horse, my favorite blanket, the patterned wallpaper. And then, a sharper, colder image. My grandmother, Meg, standing in the doorway, her face pale in the moonlight, a finger to her lips. "Hush, little one. We're going to a safe place." The whisper, the darkness, the long, endless car ride. The fragmented memories snapped into place, solidifying the horrifying truth. Marilyn sat with me for hours, showing me photo albums, telling me stories about my father, Thomas, a kind, gentle man she had loved fiercely. She spoke of my early years, my favorite toys, my quirks, the things a mother remembers about her child. Each story filled a gaping hole in my heart, weaving a tapestry of a life I should have lived. The journey was a crucible of emotions. The profound sadness for the lost years, the anger at Meg's cruel deception, but also an overwhelming sense of gratitude and love for Marilyn, who had never stopped believing. My life, which had begun with a kidnapping and a lie, was finally beginning to reveal its true, complicated, and agonizingly beautiful history. The ghosts of Willow Creek had found their voice, and they were telling me my story. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely whole. Chapter 4: The Threads of Memory. The days in Willow Creek were a blur of emotion, a torrent of information. Marilyn, my biological mother, poured out decades of bottled-up grief and unspoken memories. She showed me my father's old tools in the shed, his favorite armchair, the rose bushes he tended in the garden. Each detail, each story was a thread that began to weave the fabric of a past I never knew. I learned that my father, Thomas, had been a quiet, artistic man, a carpenter by trade who loved to build intricate birdhouses. Marilyn spoke of their deep love, their simple joys, and the profound sorrow that had engulfed their lives after my disappearance. "He never smiled again, Emily," she said, her voice thick with pain, referring to my father. "Not truly. He searched every day. He believed you were alive. His heart was broken." Thomas's death, just months after I was taken, had been attributed to a simple car accident. But now, with the chilling revelations from Meg's diaries, a darker possibility emerged. Had the grief, the relentless search, the suspicion from the authorities simply overwhelmed him, leading to a fatal distraction? The question hung heavy in the air, a silent accusation against Meg. The weight of Meg's betrayal pressed down on me. How could she, my grandmother, have inflicted such pain, not just on me, but on her own daughter and on Thomas? Marilyn, with the wisdom of age and suffering, offered a perspective I hadn't considered. "My mother Meg," Marilyn explained softly, her gaze distant. "She was always intense. She loved deeply, but her love was possessive. She never approved of Thomas. She thought he wasn't good enough for me, that he would take me away from her. When I married him, it broke her heart in a way. She saw you, Emily, as her own, as a chance to regain control." It was a chilling explanation. Not an excuse, but a glimpse into the twisted logic of a mind warped by obsessive love and a desperate need for control. Meg truly believed she was saving me, protecting me from a life she deemed unworthy. It didn't make her actions right, but it added a layer of profound tragedy to her character. She wasn't a monster, but a woman tragically consumed by her own delusions. Sarah, my daughter, watched these interactions with a quiet, compassionate understanding. She was a bridge between my two lives, a living testament to the years I had lived, the love I had known, even if built on a lie. Daniel, my grandson, with his innocent curiosity, found joy in the simple discovery of family. He played in the yard, exploring the nooks and crannies of the old house, unknowingly connecting with the ghost of the little girl I once was. As the days unfolded in Willow Creek, more memories, once locked away, began to surface. Not violent, traumatic flashbacks, but gentle, fleeting images, like sunlight filtering through dust motes. The taste of Marilyn's homemade apple pie, the scent of Thomas's wood shavings, the warmth of a small calico cat purring on my lap. These were not just stories. They were resurfacing sensations, tactile proofs of a lost childhood. My amnesia, once a blank wall, was slowly eroding, revealing the vibrant life that had been violently interrupted. I realized then that my identity wasn't just Evelyn Hall, the woman Meg had created, nor was it simply Emily Simpson, the child who was stolen. I was both, a tapestry woven from two disparate lives, two different narratives. To deny one was to deny a part of myself. The goal was no longer to erase Meg, but to integrate her, to understand the complex, fractured legacy she had left behind. The final, crucial step was to retrieve the last of Meg's diaries, the ones I hadn't dared to read in Savannah. I knew they held the answers to her ultimate motivations, perhaps even her final thoughts on her actions. We returned to Savannah, armed with the new knowledge, the new resolve. Back in my home, the diaries felt different, less threatening, more like a testament to a deeply troubled soul. I read the final entries, chronicling Meg's life after my abduction. Her constant fear of discovery, her elaborate lies to the community, her tireless efforts to instill in me the fabricated story of my parents' death. It was a life built on a terrifying house of cards, constantly on the brink of collapse. She had lived in a prison of her own making, haunted by her crime, even as she showered me with love. My anger, though still present, softened into a complex emotion akin to sorrow. She was a deeply flawed woman who had committed an unforgivable act, but she had also given me a life, however fractured. She had raised me, taught me, loved me in her own twisted way. It was a paradox that I would carry forever. The journey to Willow Creek had not just reunited me with my mother, it had reunited me with myself. The missing pieces of my past were no longer a void, but a mosaic, painful in parts, but now complete. And with that completeness came a profound sense of peace. I was ready to face the world, not as Evelyn Hall with a missing past, but as Emily Hall Simpson, a woman who carried the weight of her complex history with dignity and newfound strength. Chapter 5: Reclaiming Identity, Forging Purpose. The journey to Willow Creek, to Marilyn, and to the unearthed memories had been a baptism by fire. I returned to Savannah not as the Evelyn left, but as Evelyn Emily Hall Simpson. The decision to embrace both names was a deliberate act of integration, a refusal to erase the decades of life I had lived, even if they were built on a lie. Meg had given me a name, a life, a home. Marilyn had given me my roots, my true lineage. I was a product of both, and my identity would now reflect that complex truth. The first step was to legally acknowledge my birth name. The process was surprisingly straightforward, given the irrefutable evidence from the diaries and the corroboration from Detective Griffin's investigation. It wasn't about erasing Evelyn Hall. It was about adding Emily Simpson. The official documents now bore my full hyphenated name, a silent testament to a lifetime of hidden truth. Marilyn and I continued our slow, deliberate dance of getting to know each other. Phone calls stretched into hours filled with stories, laughter, and sometimes quiet tears. She sent me old family recipes, letters from long-lost relatives, and even a small, worn quilt she had made for me when I was a baby. Each artifact was a tangible link to a past that had been stolen, now being painstakingly reclaimed. Sarah and Daniel delighted in their new extended family, their presence a joyful bridge between generations. My retirement, once a quiet pursuit of hobbies, now took on a new purpose. As a history teacher, I had always believed in the power of narrative, of understanding the past to shape the future. Now, my own story, with its layers of deception, trauma, and ultimate healing, became my most profound lesson. I felt a growing urge to share it, not for sensationalism, but for healing, for understanding. I decided to write a book, not a tell-all exposé filled with bitterness, but a memoir, a journey of self-discovery, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and a cautionary tale about the corrosive power of secrets and obsessive love. It would be a story about loss, yes, but also about profound discovery, about the intricate, often painful process of putting together the shattered pieces of a life. The writing process was cathartic, a deeper form of therapy than any I had ever known. Each chapter brought new insights, new layers of understanding, not just about Meg and Marilyn, but about myself. I explored the psychology of Meg's actions, the desperate love that twisted into an act of profound harm. I tried to understand the profound grief and resilience of Marilyn, the mother who never stopped searching. And I delved into the complex emotions of living with an erased past, the subtle ways it had shaped my personality, my quietness, my deep appreciation for stability. The book wasn't just for me. It was for anyone who felt lost, who carried an unspoken wound, who yearned for a past they couldn't remember. It was a message of hope that truth, however painful, ultimately brings liberation. Marilyn, now reunited with her Emily, found a peace she had never believed possible. She visited us in Savannah, and I returned to Willow Creek. We baked together. We gardened. We simply sat in comfortable silence, making up for decades of lost time. She found a new zest for life, her days now filled with the joy of rediscovering her daughter and getting to know her granddaughter and great-grandson. I also found a new depth in my teaching. I returned to the classroom not as a full-time teacher, but as a guest lecturer, sharing my story, subtly weaving in themes of identity, memory, and historical truth. My students, often jaded, listened with rapt attention, realizing that history was not just dates and names, but the living, breathing narratives of human experience. One sunny afternoon, I found myself at the cemetery where Meg was buried. There was no anger left, no raw pain, just a complex, swirling mix of emotions. I brought 2 small framed photographs. One was a faded snapshot of a young me, perhaps 7 or 8, standing next to a smiling Meg. The other was a recent photo. Marilyn, Sarah, Daniel, and me, all smiling, arms linked, in front of Marilyn's yellow house in Willow Creek. I placed them carefully on Meg's gravestone. "You gave me life, Meg," I whispered, the wind rustling through the Spanish moss hanging from the live oaks. "And you took it away, but now I'm taking back my truth, all of it." It was not an act of forgiveness, but an act of acceptance, a recognition of the full, complicated legacy she had left behind. She had committed a terrible crime, but she had also loved me in her own twisted way. And for that, I found a strange, paradoxical gratitude. My life, which had begun with a kidnapping and a profound lie, was now complete, woven with threads of both sadness and joy, loss and discovery. I was Evelyn Emily Hall Simpson, a woman who had journeyed through darkness to find the light, a living testament to the enduring power of truth, healing, and the unbreakable bonds of family. My quiet life in Savannah was no longer just a haven. It was a testament to survival, resilience, and the profound grace of finding oneself after a lifetime of being lost.